Kristen's got with her tonight some of the other administrators from the building, and we're going to begin reporting out on our goals and our benchmarks and
participation.
We have participation here as one of them. Mr. Gritchen, thanks for cutting that out. But Kristen will be leading the discussion, and then each administrator that's accompanying her tonight will break down areas that specifically relate to the areas they supervise. So, Kristen, why don't you begin?
So at the next 3 board meetings, we will be reporting out on the performance indicators under the academic achievement and school culture district goal. Tonight we're going to be focusing on graduation, attendance, matriculation, and engagement. So we're going to start by looking at the first page that is provided, which was the graduation rate. And for the graduation rate, I have Beth Augustine, the Director of Student Services, with me to present on this one. So for the first time this year, you'll see, if you could go to the next page, you'll see the chart which includes the adjusted graduation rate for the first time this year. And so that rate recalculates the graduation rate from 2012 to include students who did not earn a high school diploma in a regular fashion. So they didn't earn it through RB, so they may have earned a GED, or students who took longer than 4 years to graduate. So while these students didn't graduate with their original cohort in 2012, they did graduate by June 30th of the following school year, which would have been this past summer. And so that's why you can see the adjusted rate went up to 94.4%.
Which one are we tracking on the chart? The adjusted rate or the cohort rate?
Well, this is the first year that the adjusted rate has been available. It's something new. So I don't know if that's something that the board wants to decide as to whether or not we want to start reporting both, or if we would just want to continue to report the original cohort.
Well, one thing I think the board needs to be aware of is that even students, I'm sure this is part of your presentation probably, right? Students who are in special services.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you guys present. I'm sorry.
Can you let them present then?
So the other asterisk underneath the chart is that the federal requirements change the reporting requirements for the graduation rate. And so that speaks to what Kevin was referring to with the special education students. So special education students that choose to defer their diploma in order to stay at RB to receive services counted against us starting in 2011. And so those students aren't really reflected in the adjusted graduation rate either, because typically those students stay on for 3, sometimes even 4 years, because they have the ability to stay on until their 21st birthday to receive the services that they need. And in talking with Gail Brinken, our director for special education, that she's really focused on providing better transitional services to these students. And so as a result, more of these students want to stay at RB to get the services that they need instead of getting that diploma. And so that, unfortunately negatively impacts our graduation rate, because those students by law are counted against us.
But does that student then get added in the year they do graduate?
I do not believe so, because
So
they only recalculate that adjusted graduation rate, I believe, for that 5th year. And so because those students stay on for 2, 3, sometimes 3.5 years, I don't believe that they get calculated in. But since it's the first year that they reported the adjusted rate, we'll have to see whether or not they recalculated in the future.
And make a change.
And what is
to
the
that
impact on that?
Well, this year you can see from the data that I provided you at the bottom of the first section of additional information. It's about 6 students this year that were special education students that decided to stay at RB to receive services.
Okay.
At the end of the time they receive services, then they just are no longer eligible to receive services, so technically they'll never graduate?
No, they do receive their diploma.
Okay.
So
at the end.
technically they defer their diploma to receive those services, and then when they get to 21, they earn that diploma.
They give them the diploma then?
Yes.
So even if a student has accumulated 22 credits in the right areas, if they choose to defer their diploma, it's going to count against us.
Okay.
And so you can see currently the graduation rate for the class of 2013 did drop from the previous year. but we tried to provide you some information to predict what that fifth-year adjusted graduation rate would be. And so currently we have 7 fifth-year seniors that are at RB, and they're working on earning the rest of their credits. And if all of them graduate this year, the rate would increase to 92.3, and it's recalculated next year. And then going through the additional information, we had some students that transferred to another school, and that school didn't claim them. And so according to the state, it kind of looks like they dropped out, when in actuality we confirmed that they did go to another school and graduate. So that's something that we need to work with the state and the other school to correct for next year. So when they recalculate that fifth rate, those students will no longer count against us. And so if all of that were to happen, the adjusted graduation rate for next year would go to 93.3%.
For 2013.
Correct.
Yep.
And so some of the things that we've been doing already to work on improving the graduation rate, we were able to run the English and Math summer school courses, even though they didn't break even. So hopefully those students will not fall behind in their credits. We also plan to offer a second session of summer school, which we talked about. And then this year we've dedicated one academic support class for students to use APEX, which is the program that we used in the summer. And that will provide students with an opportunity to take some online courses that are self-paced to recover credits. And so we have about 30 students doing that right now, and those 7 fifth-year seniors are some of those students that are in those courses, as well as our transfer students who come in and are short credits. We've been able to put some of those students in there.
So Kristen, I got a question for you. So if I have a freshman who is failing, so he's starting his sophomore year, he's short, are we trying to have them take summer school classes to try to make up so they're not gonna be at a negative? Okay.
Absolutely.
And then one of your recommendations for next year's summer school would be having 2 sessions of
Yes.
English and math, okay?
Yes.
Beth, you have some information you want to provide us?
I do. So Dr. Skakis had asked if I could put together a projection rate for the next couple of years, anticipating what our graduation rate might look like. Again, these are rough numbers, but it's I think a pretty good indicator, and I'll kind of talk you through where I came up with these numbers.
Does anybody have hand sanitizer as we pass these?
Yeah, you wait home. I'm okay. So.
I worked hard to be here today.
I know
so.
you did, I know you did.
So if you can look at the class of 2014, our current seniors, we already have 8 students that have left for a GED or program or have left to go through American School. And that's a correspondence program that we use for credit recovery, but they also offer a diploma program. And we have learned that the state does not recognize American School as an in-state transfer. So those students count against us. So if a student is, not doing well at RB and this isn't the right environment and they decide they want to go for a GED or they want to go for an alternative diploma, they can withdraw, but those students will count against us. So we already know that those 8 students will. We have 7 students from the class of 2014 that have dropped. They've just decided to leave school, even though we've provided counseling and mentoring and done everything possible to try to get them to stay. There are probably a few students that have been dropped for non-attendance. Even though we've tried interventions, we've done home visits, we've tried truancy tickets, there are just a handful of kids we just can't get to come to school. So we already know that those 7 will count against us. The reclassified students, in January of each year, we look at our juniors and we run a list of where they're at credit-wise. And if a student is less than 11 credits, we talk about those students and we make a decision on whether or not to reclassify them to sophomore status so that they do not take the PSAE. So in the state system, their name isn't being pulled to take the PSAE because they're probably not prepared to take it. They're probably behind in their math. They're probably behind in their English. So the state gives us the right to do that. And I think we do that with a lot of integrity. I think there are a lot of high schools that maybe reclassify more than they should. And I can say that in my 10 years here, that we have really kind of stuck to that number and have done it with, like I said, some integrity. So we have 9 students right now that should be seniors, but are classified as juniors. We also have, in addition to that, 7 students that, after going through all of their credits, they're credit deficient. They are missing credits, and they potentially will not graduate in May. We have 3 special education students that will not be receiving a diploma, and that will go through the certificate of, earn a certificate of completion, and we have 1 student that has been expelled. So, kind of worst case scenario, our current seniors, the graduation rate would be 90.2. But that doesn't take into consideration the credit deficient students and the reclassified students that are currently in the APEX program. So we're working to get them caught up during this school year, and then we'll also give them the opportunity to go through a summer school program in May. And as long as they earn their credits by the end of June, we can count them in our graduation rate. So if you look at the 9 and the 7, we can definitely increase that graduation rate and with the interventions that we have in place.
But if we reclassified 9 class of 2014 students to they're juniors now, right?
Correct.
So we don't expect them to graduate until the end of 2015, right?
No, the hope is that through the APEX program, the credit recovery program that we have, that they will still be able to make up those credits, even though we reclassified them through American School Credit Recovery. Hopefully some of them have gone to summer school and they're taking these APEX classes to get them caught up.
And if they don't graduate, but you keep working with them, and they
Yes.
do graduate by 2015, then they'd fit in the second
Correct.
5-year category.
Correct, and they would be.
So they were given 2 opportunities to
Yes.
catch up, and the state recognizes
Yes.
both sets of opportunities.
They would be in the following cohort.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Same concept.
We got Mike.
Do we count our students, like, we take our freshman class and we carry them through to senior year, and we subtract out kids who transfer out and add kids who transfer in?
Yes.
So it's not like the 7 kids dropped out in the last 30 days.
Correct. So I took these numbers, I ran a report of all of our withdrawals for the last 4 years, and then saw students that did in-state transfers, out-of-state transfers. They don't count against us.
Right.
As long as they are landing in another school, it doesn't impact our graduation rate.
So they could have withdrew last year.
Correct.
But they're still part of our class since they didn't go anywhere else.
Exactly. And then I just provided you data for the class of 2015, our current juniors, and we'll go through that process again of running a list of their transcripts, look at their number of excuse me, their number of credits, and then determine how many students will reclassify. What I can tell right now, we're looking at about 10 students. We could get transfer students in that are credit deficient. We could, have students that have health issues or whatever. But right now, we're looking at about 10 students that we'll potentially reclassify that are sitting at junior status to sophomore status. And then go ahead.
No, so we're responsible, if it's a way of saying it, for pretty much any student that starts enrolls as a freshman, if they don't graduate. But I know you explained it, but would you just explain it again? You mentioned it. What about students who transfer in as sophomores, juniors, seniors, who are we're at a different school?
Yes,
Are they tied?
they're tied to our graduation
Once
rate.
they come in, you're responsible?
Yes, they're tied to our graduation rate.
What if they leave? What if they transfer in as sophomore and transfer out at the end of their junior year? Are we responsible for anybody who transfers in, or what wasn't the first school responsible for?
If they transfer into us, we become responsible.
Okay.
If they transfer out, we're no longer responsible.
As long as they
have to
land-
they have to end up at an actual school,
Okay.
or they count against us. So that's why the importance of the transfer out paperwork and where they're going and documenting a school and following up with that school, that the student, show up at your door with their paperwork, is really important.
Okay.
So let me ask you one question. So we have a kid that wants to transfer out.
Mm-hmm.
What if we call the school that he's going to and they say, no, he's not gonna? he hasn't shown up yet, then what do we do then? Because we're still the responsible party.
If the parent signs a student out, goes through the process of transferring a student and requests records to be sent, to LT, and the family doesn't show up, there's really not a lot that we can do. And we can call the parent, and we've had this situation where a parent says they're moving and they're going to transfer their student to another school, and we'll call them and say, we've sent records, but we understand that they haven't enrolled in the school. We've gotten truancy officers involved. We've called DCFS before, knowing that the student wasn't receiving any education, but
But we're responsible still.
They become a drop.
They count against us.
it
Okay,
counts
counts
against us.
against us.
They
Counts
become a
against
drop
us.
at that point.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
considered a drop, unfortunately.
All right.
Gary had a question.
With regards to the reclassified and the credit deficient,
Mm-hmm.
even though you're looking at class of 2015, you're monitoring sophomores and freshmen, right?
Right, so-
Earlier on to try to get them so that when it does become a junior, you don't have to reclassify them, right?
Absolutely. So I couldn't really provide you with freshman data because we don't have
Sure.
any, obviously, at this point. And same thing with the sophomores. When I looked through the credits, it would have been really time consuming to go through each of their transcripts to see if it was English or it was math that they were missing. And then the HOPE mentoring program is our targeted intervention for our sophomores. So I don't know if you want to speak to that or how you decided on those students.
But I got a question for you. What if we have a transfer student that comes in that is so deficient? You know what I mean? That's,
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
like, they're supposed to come in as a junior, and you're looking and going, oh my God, the credit
Freshman.
season is
Yeah.
freshman.
It
Yes.
becomes our
Happens
responsibility.
regularly.
Yes, that become our responsibility.
Then what happens then? We have to reclassify them down, or?
And they
So-
count against the graduation rate.
Yes,
Yeah.
so if a student comes in as a junior and they have freshman credits, counselors work to do everything they can to help them earn those credits. I mean, the APEX program is certainly going to be a help. We have an in-house program that's monitored by our staff, and we have direct connections with what those students are doing. In the past, we've used American School, the correspondence program, but, to be honest, it costs money, and a lot of times these are families that just don't have it, and then it becomes the student's responsibility to, how are they gonna get caught up? And quite honestly, it doesn't make sense to load them up with 7 classes. I mean, if they're struggling, they're failing multiple classes when they came in, they probably can't handle a full caseload. They probably need an academic support, or they need, some kind of opportunity to get homework done when they're in the building because they're not getting it done when they leave. And I can tell you that number of our reclassified students and our most at-risk students, a lot of them are transfer students. A lot of them are.
So, and the ISB sets these rules that we have to follow.
Correct.
And when do you have opportunities to, maybe Kevin should answer, you could to meet with them? I mean, it's, we, as a board, sit here and not understanding all the details, but you just think certain things jump out that don't make any sense.
Right.
So one thing that doesn't make sense is, why do we, in essence, get punished, if that's the right word, pay a penalty because they weren't educated by their last school? If they came in at the level they would be at our school, then, if we're a junior, but they're gonna be a freshman here, and we graduate them in 4 years, we were a success.
Correct.
But we're treated as if we were not a success because some other school failed them.
It's the same thing with the PSAE. We have students that will come in and enter the building in November of their junior year, and who knows what kind of curriculum they've had before they get here. But we're required to test them, and those scores impact our scores.
So how do you talk to the state board about it?
We go down to the superintendent's conference, like in October when I'm
Good
going.
thing we have you around.
And we have Superintendent's Association, which we're trying to work on some things, and then we pay a group of lobbyists to lobby on behalf of the
Oh.
districts.
Okay.
I had
Kevin has
I had two
two
questions. Number one, would it be premature to have on this list class of 2016? I know you kind of answered that a little bit for Mr. Gritchen. But pretty much after they complete 1 year here, you start to get an idea of these categories. These are the categories you want to follow, I'm taking, correct?
Yeah, I think second semester of their sophomore year would probably be a better,
Okay.
give me a better idea of who we're looking at. I mean, we clearly know students that are at risk. We clearly know students that have attendance issues, because quite honestly, that tends to be the reason that students fall behind.
Okay.
So I would say second semester, sophomore year would be a better indicator.
Second question, there's been a lot of discussion at the building level and in meetings that I've attended with departments and with department chairs or with building administrators in regards to the board goals. So Beth, you went first tonight, so I'm going to use you as kind of the guinea pig to explain what we're trying to accomplish here. But there's been a lot of questions and feedback back from groups in the building. Well, if you follow the SMART goal concept, this goal is unattainable because you can't achieve 100% of a graduation cohort. Just if you include just even the special ed students, because some of them have the right to stay till they're 21. What Beth and Kristen are demonstrating here tonight is what I wanted to see as a superintendent, and I hope the board wants to see is, after a year and a half of being at RB, we're already beginning to identify students who are not on pace to graduate, and we're starting to put interventions in place instead of this summer after graduation when they were told they couldn't walk. We're looking at things 2 to 2.5 years in advance. They're identifying interventions for me to bring forward to the board when it comes time for staffing or when it comes time for budgeting to put those interventions to directly relate to this. So Beth's smaller goals or SMART goals can be directly aligned to, well, what are we going to do with these 27 kids from the class of 2015 over the next year and a half so that we can try to get 50% or 60%, 100% of them graduated by the time their class graduates, or at least by that June 30th deadline. So there is a ton of potential for the departments and the building administrators to work on smaller goals and SMART goals based on these larger board goals, because we're trying to establish a growth model with them. So we're looking at all 4 classes every year on these types of targets, and then they can do interventions and goals from that.
Mm-hmm.
So Beth, Beth knows already, but I know Pam's talked with Beth. That's what we're starting to identify as interventions already for the class of 2015, and eventually this class of 2016 once you get your data, right?
And just a suggestion, several years ago when we would have the credit recovery program for the seniors that didn't graduate, we also had it for our incoming seniors that were credit deficient. And we did away with that several years ago. That's something that we might want to reconsider. The students, particularly that are really far behind, instead of the traditional summer school, allowing them to participate in the credit recovery program offered through Apex, because maybe these students could work independently at home, and it would give them the opportunity to earn more credits than they could in our standard summer school program.
Just write up a proposal so I can see it, and Tim and I can figure if it's budgeted for or something we need to go to the board for.
Okay.
I have a question. On much of the research that I've been exposed to in some of the conferences that I've attended of late, they spoke and they said that 9th grade was the highest predictor of your graduation rate. And I don't know if that's also what you have in your coffers, your data, and if you're looking at programs to kind of address that, are you going in that direction or looking at something preventative?
We have a lot of programs that are already in place and that we're starting to implement. So one of the things that we have available to a lot of freshmen is academic support. Mm-hmm. And that provides, all of our students and all of our freshmen an opportunity, but especially the students that we know that are coming in at risk or who are already in extended reading or extended math, the opportunity to be in a small guided study hall where the teacher is tracking their grades on a regular basis and helping the students learn executive functioning skills, which really show, the research has shown that if you can master the executive functioning skills, that's a better predictor of success in high school, then any standardized test is really looking at, can you organize your materials? Do you set goals? Do you manage your time well? All of those things. So the teachers and academic support work with those students. After their freshman year, we look at students who are in the bottom 20% as they enter in their sophomore year, and we've started a mentoring program for those students called HOPE. And so that pairs one of those at-risk students up with a teacher who continues to provide the same sort of support and checks in with the student and holds them accountable for going in to see their teacher, using National Honor Society tutors. So we have some of those are just a few examples of some of the support that we provide to freshmen. But I would say overall, freshman year is one of the years that we provide the most support to students to really help them with that transition to high school, because research also shows that transitions are often especially difficult for students. So we want to make sure that they transition and have a very successful year, their freshman year.
Excuse me.
Any other questions before?
Well, I have a question then for Kevin. How does it come, so if your team, and in the department, they recognize that there's a need,
Mm-hmm.
is there a process in place so that you're able to come to the board and say, we need stuff or money or something to make this happen, so that given our goals, it would be a shame that we can't implement programs to help us meet our academic goals because we just didn't know about it or didn't know that there were needs?
There is a process in place, and I only bring it to the board if I think it's going to cost us to go over budget. So starting in November, when we start looking at attendance projections, and then after January, when we start doing staffing, and into the spring when parents start bringing interventions, like this year we hired the other academic support. We ran math and English summer school without being cost neutral. We still ran the bridge program. We did some PBIS stuff. That's when we're doing the budget development process between Tim and I. So we try to find every creative solution to get the interventions they need and still get a balanced budget for the board. And then if I think something's out of whack or it's going to cause something outside of the practices we've been following with the board, that's when I bring it to you. And that's like when we brought this year about the math and English summer school, or we brought add in the third academic support person to directly help with some of our interventions for the freshmen in Apex. And we added the .2 credit recovery in August for Apex because we realized we already could start working with some of these students. So we've been following that.
Okay.
And there is a process in place.
And I just want to highlight just something quickly. The freshmen have a lot of teaming support. So with the C team, that's about 80 students that are receiving a lot of support with their teachers. There's contact with the counselor and the social worker. Our Team A students that are receiving a period and a half of English and a period and a half of math, they are connected with an academic support teacher. There's weekly team meetings on those freshmen. The counselors and the social workers receive DNF lists weekly and identify students at progress report time that may need some additional work with executive functioning, time management. So, those are some other interventions that are just naturally taking place.
And Kristen, we're holding our academic support people to make sure that they're delivering what the students need, right?
Yes.
So they'll be respectful of all the other administrators here. We want to keep these presentations to about 10 minutes per goal. So,
Okay.
Beth, you
One
have
more question.
All right.
And expelled, if the students go, we expel them, but they go to another school, they still count against us or not?
Well, they can't transfer to another in-state school.
They could go to a private school.
They could go to a private school, but it still counts against us.
So expelled, even if they go somewhere else and graduate. What if they come back here and graduate in time?
Well, we have a situation like that now. So I believe once the student re-enrolls, we can include him in our graduation rate.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Matriculation, sorry, John.
Yeah. Okay.
This adds a lot of data, I think, to, this goal. And I sort of can understand other people in the building, our teachers and administrators are looking at this and we cannot achieve 100%.
Right.
I mean, I think we should consider maybe reevaluating that.
Right, so let me
Considering-
remind you, though, why we put that on there. The goal is to start every year trying to get 100%. The board made it clear that we all know that they can't get 100%. So the one thing that would probably help ease the teachers' nerves was that if all the board could nod their head and say, we know you're not gonna get 100% of the cohort. But if you start, I think if we start lowering the target and we start getting back to where, hey, let's set 2 percentage points higher or 1%, then we make it easier to forget some of these kids 3 years from now. That's why.
But I'd like to keep it 100% only from the fact that those things that we can control, we should graduate 100%,
Right.
Right.
right?
Right.
I think we
So
should keep it 100%.
Right, so the
too.
things that go against us that we can't control, we understand that. But the things we can control, we should be
That's a good point.
100%.
Great
And
point.
I think no matter, even if we lowered it, they would still be doing everything they're doing to help each and every one of these kids. But the perception is we could lose some kids through the cracks. Oh, it's only 95%, this one, we won't
But
try as hard.
And each year, if we get a report that says 100%, but we have 8 this year that is GED that goes against us, next year it's only 0, 0 or 2, we can understand the percentage
We're
variance.
accounting for everyone.
But we still, those that we can control should be the goal 100%.
Well, and can I say something right now? This is the best graduation report, breakdown and explaining and telling you what you're gonna do different and stuff like that I've ever seen. Have you? All right.
Very good, very good.
All right, let's go to matriculation.
Wait.
Okay, what do you want to change to, 95 or 92?
Plus, I don't want to have to,
John, the impact would be is 1 year it's 8,
didn't
the
say
next year it's
anything.
2.
Plus-
Here's my point. We are not in control of people that don't show up. Now, Beth made that point. You don't show up, that's most of the battle.
So we have an explanation to that, that's out of our control, what
so now,
Gary said.
Whoa, maybe it is in our control.
But, yeah.
Maybe those that are, maybe the participation rate, maybe activities, if there's something out there to get these kids back involved, they may won't come back to school. It's the ones that we can't control. Choosing to get a GED.
All right, I just thought I'd bring it up.
and I don't think it would be appropriate to now try to determine what's our best guess of
Right.
how many kids are going to drop out.
Right. I think
I don't think we want to have a floating number each year trying to do that.
reflect back when we went through this 3 or 4 month process to get these targets,
Yeah,
because the board was concerned with, well, how are we coming up with the 0.2% we wanted to raise? And we were using arbitrary numbers, were we setting the bar too low, were we setting the bar too high?
Yeah, but we didn't have this data.
Right, but what I'm saying to you now is,
And I'm happy to
we're shooting for
continue to update
100%,
you.
and as
I like
long as
this.
the board knows 3 years out that we probably aren't gonna get 8 students, because they might be special needs students, or they might be GED students, or they transferred, it shows that we're tracking everybody that's walking through our doors and everybody that's leaving, and that was the goal of these goals.
And it shows our priority. When we say 100%, that means we care about 100% of our students, and we believe it's important that they should all graduate.
I don't know, I got some issues with wishful thinking, that's all. So,
All right.
I'll just leave it at that.
Can we let Beth go because?
I have one more part,
Okay,
sorry.
which one's yours?
Matriculation.
All right, so let's
So
go
Kristen's gonna
matriculation.
start.
All right.
So we'd like to provide you with an accurate, updated chart that clearly calculates the graduation rate. One of the reasons for the error is over the past 3 years in calculating this rate, we've had 3 different people calculate the rate. So there was some miscommunication about that. So we were able to update it for you to provide you the most accurate information. And then moving forward, Beth will be calculating the rate so that we know that every student, just like the graduation rate, every student is accounted for, and that rate is calculated correctly.
Mary Ann, for the audience, can you find matriculation there?
I think it's the next, right?
That student attendance might be a little further down. There you go.
Right
So
there.
the information that I passed out, this chart is not as accurate as the one you have in front of you.
Okay.
So you can see the categories in the chart changed a little bit, and we were able to count for all of the students but 2. And these numbers are based on self-reporting or, does everybody have it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
These numbers were based on self-reporting or whether or not students requested a transcript to be sent to a college. So Beth is going to talk about some of the things that we currently do to encourage students to go to a 2-year or 4-year institution. and then some additional things that we've added this year.
Yeah, I mean, historically, we've had about between 60 and 65% of our students go on to a four-year college, and somewhere between 25 and 30% of our students go on to a two-year college. We have evening presentations for parents. Many of you have attended some of those presentations. I don't know if you want me to go through line by line here, or if you'd rather me just talk about some of the things that we're doing for the future.
Highlight some key points and things for the future, so if the board needs to pay for them, they won't give me a hard
Okay,
time.
actually, these are free. I think one of the best opportunities came this summer when Dr. Skinkis forwarded me an email from Triton College. They had tried a pilot program at OPRF where they had a rep come twice a month to meet with students and talk about programming at Triton. And so it sounded fantastic. Obviously, it wasn't going to cost us anything. So twice a month, Rolando is our rep from Triton. He is meeting with students that have indicated an interest in a two-year college, but more importantly, he's meeting with our seniors that have indicated that they don't have any post-secondary plans. So in addition to talking about the college process, he's able to talk about programming. These are individual appointments. He's getting to know these students. He's getting to know their interests. He's getting them excited about the opportunity of school after high school. We've already set up a schedule for the entire semester, so he's completely booked. In addition to that, he will meet with parents. He will talk about the financial aid process. And I think that's the group of students that, you know, we really need to spend some time with. We need to focus on those kids that just don't know what they're going to do. And come the end of their senior year, if they haven't made that, steps to apply to college, then they're the ones that say, well, I'm just going to get a job, or, not really thinking through all of their options and all of their opportunities. In addition to that, we are taking advantage of technology, and we are now using Remind 101, which is a feature where we can send text messages to students, but they can't text us back. So we are texting them reminders, we're texting them information about college fairs, we're giving them updates on application deadlines, we're letting them know that, again, the college rep is here, that the ISAC woman is here to talk about financial aid, and it's just another way to communicate with students. Email doesn't seem to work, but they certainly look at their phones, and that was really evident last week when our first visit from the ISAC woman to talk about funding financial aid options. We typically have one or two students, and it was a full house in the College and Career Center. We probably had 15 students each lunch period. So we know that that's a good way to reach out to students, and money is always something that comes into play when students are making that decision. So making certain that students and parents really have good information about the financial aid options out there. We're also giving all of our students free access to Financial Fit, which we talk to students about finding that college that fits them, going to a college campus and feeling like, yes, I could spend the next 4 years here. But this program really helps parents figure out what can we afford, what's something that's going to work in my budget. And it's not just for juniors and seniors. We're going to help our freshman parents start planning ahead. We're inviting more college reps to come to RB, some schools that maybe aren't super selective but are looking to take a chance on some kids that are willing to work hard and maybe have some unique talents and just haven't explored them. And so if we can get some of these kids in as sophomores to talk to college reps, they might feel a little bit more excited about it. And then in addition to that, we are looking at the National Student Clearinghouse, which to track what happens with our students once they leave RB. Although we have self-reporting, we have students say they're going to a 2-year or a 4-year, we have not really done anything to track what happens to them. So I have some information that I will give to Dr. Skinkis to share with you and see if this is something that the board wants to finance. It's relatively cheap. It's only $475 for an annual subscription, but they do all the work. They send us all the data 8 years out, and so it would give us an opportunity, and it would really inform some of our teachers too with how students are doing once they leave RB, if they actually earn a high school or a college diploma, if they do it in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, if they don't finish it all. So
Questions?
On
Yeah,
the-
what about dual credit through Triton? Can we encourage some of that, or?
It's really difficult. Transportation seems to be one of the sticking points for kids to get there. The classes tend to be 3:30. A lot of our students are involved here at RB, so it's very inconvenient for them to leave school, go to Triton and come back here.
Do
And then-
we identify those classes and let them know? I mean, we've got parking's an issue, so we know students drive.
Mhm.
But are we at least identifying some of those classes? Maybe they can take some of those classes at night if they wanted to, or in the summer?
And I think that's one of the things we're using our college rep for from Triton. He's willing to bring some professors and go into the applied arts classes and into some of the other courses that are directly connected to the programs at Triton to talk about that. So he's going to be doing that during during registration time.
The other thing I'd like to do with their Triton representatives, when I was at Triton, coaching and everything else like that, he needs to expand and offer what other junior colleges are offering that they don't offer, because those students can go there and pay in district rate. So it's just something to expand, maybe try to get those kids to jump on it, so.
Exactly.
Any other questions for Beth?
Could you explain, how do you confirm that this data is accurate? I mean, how do you know there were 205 kids that went to 4-year or 20 that went to work?
So we use the transcript requests. If a student, seniors fill out that transcript request form on graduation day, and that's where we send their transcripts to. And that's data that we hold in Naviance. Whether or not they follow through and they actually attend, same thing with Triton. They request a transcript to be sent to Triton, that's indicated in Naviance. That's how we figure out the tallies. But we don't have any information that confirms they've actually followed through with that. And that's why looking at the student clearinghouse might be an opportunity, a good investment, so we can really see, are these numbers these are self-reported numbers, but what's our real matriculation rate?
And how'd you find out that 3 kids enjoyed a gap year after they graduated?
Because
you do it by transcripts.
Because literally I went through every single student from the graduating class, and any student that was unknown or didn't have a 2-year or 4-year, I went to that student's counselor and I asked them.
Oh.
And so we had 3 students that decided to take a gap year, which is, I think, the first year that we've had 3 students to do that. It's very popular in some of the North Shore high schools, so we're maybe setting a trend. I don't know.
And do we really think there's been a shift from 2011 and 2010 to 2012 and 13 where there was a 5 or 6% drop, or is it more probably the reporting?
I think it's more of the reporting.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right, Beth, go get Will.
Okay.
Student attendance, Mr. Sibley, Ms. Sullivan. So the board recently approved Ms. Sullivan as a assistant dean. She receives a stipend to assist the dean's office a period during the day and night with attendance and some discipline issues, as well as with supervision, similar to the same role that Mr. DeGetti serves in as an assistant dean. So about 14 days off her appointment. She's had her first board meeting already doing a presentation.
Gotta like that.
And I'd like to thank you guys for bringing her on board, and I appreciate that very much.
So if you look at the student average daily attendance, you can see it dropped slightly from 2012 until 2013. Although despite that decrease, it's the second best rate we've had in the past 6 years. And that was pretty surprising considering we've had the highest number of chronic truants last year as well. And they did change, the state did change how chronic truants were defined in 2011. So that has an impact, but it still has been the highest rate that we've had. So Dave's going to talk about, some of the things that we've already had in place and will continue to do, and then some of the new things that we've put in place this year.
Back to the truancy rate, there was a 10% in 2011. It dropped down to 5%, so a student could go 18 days of unverified attendance down to 9 days, and now we're responsible to really tighten this up on what we had to do in trying to get these kids in. Also, a part with the issue was when Ms. Spry, Heather Spry, was split positions last year. She was working in the Welcome Center and then spending part of the day in the attendance office, and that contact that she had with parents and kids fell off a little bit. And now we're starting to pick it back up, and she's doing an excellent job. She's actually writing referrals for kids that are for excessive absences, so I'm staying on top of that and dealing with those kids and those parents.
And the reason we've been able to do that and shift Ms. Spry back to the attendance office is because of the additional staff that we were able to hire for the security team. So that's been a huge help in really allowing Heather to do her job and go back to monitoring the students on a regular basis and holding them accountable.
Well, Heather does an excellent job of notifying me, and she's going to also be notifying Neil and Lori on how to deal with kids. At this point, Lori will be addressing the seniors and the freshmen, the chronic freshmen. Lori's also been involved in Apex. She's been going to the Apex room with our fifth-year seniors twice a day, checking on the kids, making sure they're doing the work, making sure they're in school. And her and I have actually been working with a couple kids, trying to make sure they're there every day. There's kids in the Apex room that could actually finish this week and graduate and get them off the books. Neil will continue to work with the freshmen. He'll do the referrals with the freshmen. He'll work on the attendance and, with the freshmen also. With the juniors, I'll continue to work with the juniors along with the other team as they come through. But I focus a lot on the seniors because this is where we need to get the graduation up. If I stay on the seniors with Lori's help, we should be able to get them in school and get them through. I think that's important. And I think with all four of us working together, Heather, Lori, Neil, and myself, I think we can really tie this up a little bit better, get our attendance rate up, get the graduation rate up, because like they said with the guidance office or the counselors is that attendance is here. 95% of life is showing up. You need to be in school to learn, and that's what we're focusing on. We do a lot of different things. We have parent meetings. We have conferences with the students. We continue with we do the punitive stuff, the in-schools, the Saturday detentions, the lunch detentions, and all that stuff. But the other things that we do that really help the kids is we bring in the small teams through student services, where we bring these kids up and we have a discussion. What can we do for these kids? Because sometimes I can write kids tickets, I can charge their parents, the kid is still not going to come to school. So how can I help that kid get to school and get them through? So we bring them out and we open it up to the floor. Sometimes we have to bring them to the sit team. And then sometimes they, no matter what we do, they don't show up. And we put a lot of work in getting these kids to school, and we will continue to do that because overall it's going to affect us. It's also going to affect that student. And when a kid tries to drop, I had one this morning, I don't want to be here. Well, it's not in your best interest to drop. Here are the things that we can do, and how can I help you? And I've got his mom coming in next week. We're all going to have a team meeting, and then we're going to move on from that.
Some of the teams that Dave's mentioning are internal teams within departments, so if there was a question on that, that's an explanation of that.
And one of the other resources that we've been able to put in place this year is we've been able to hire a full-time behavioral interventionist who will hopefully be able to start to work with Dave and his team to provide those students who are chronically truant with just one more resource so that she can meet with them and provide some additional interventions and support one-on-one. And so we're looking forward to hopefully getting that up and running so that those students have that support as well.
Any questions?
I have two questions. The first one is when you just look at numbers, they don't mean much. So if 7% of our students are off, that means that's 100 kids a day on average, right? Because we have almost 1,500 students. So out of that group, I mean, certainly some of them are just sick or they're at a college visit or whatever. Like, what percentage? Like, is it half that you have to go at? I mean, how many kids in a average year do you have to spend time trying to manage?
The numbers is few, but we still have to go after them because we spend a lot of our time on those kids because
Sure.
when they're not in class, they're not passing. And that's what we work on at this point. I don't have a number for you. The 100
No,
kids.
it's just a gut feel. I'm not asking you to give numbers. What's your gut feeling? Like, How many kids on average day do you, are the ones you really have to deal
Well,
with?
we base it on our Apex students right now. The
Okay.
7 kids in the Apex, that
Okay.
means I've been working with these kids for the previous 4 years, and plus the couple that we probably lost, and then the couples that have gained. And we just try to stay on top of them so we can get them to the point where they can graduate.
The other question I have is, you know, we are provided, we should have this type of position. Can you put a little, I mean, now that we approved a behavioral interventionist, sounds nice, but can you put a little color on what do they really do to, I mean, I get an idea what an assistant principal or a dean does to a certain extent, but what does that person really do for us and for the students?
So the behavioral interventionist works closely with Gail Brinken, who's the director of special education, and she's really targeting the students that are in our tier 3 for behavior. So that's about, you know, the top 5% of
What
our
does tier
students.
3 mean? I've never heard that
So,
before.
so sorry, later on in the year, we're going to be presenting on RTI, and you'll see that later tonight in the
Okay.
district improvement plan.
Okay.
And so that's language from RTI, which is response to intervention.
Okay.
And so response to intervention has 3 tiers.
Okay.
And the highest tier is about 5% of the students who, you know, no matter what supports we've provided in the past, have been yet to be successful, either academically or in this case behaviorally.
Okay.
And so our behavioral interventionists will work with those students to, for some students, create a behavior intervention plan. So when the student, you know, is having some behavioral issues, all of the teachers and dean's office will be on the same page as to how to respond to that student and support that student through that behavior to hopefully prevent it from occurring. And then one additional thing will be hopefully working with attendance, so that once we establish a certain criteria of students that, you know, she's going to be working with attendance, that she can meet with them, try to identify the cause of why they're not attending school, and then provide them with the correct resources that they need.
Got it.
Any other
Thank you.
questions?
Just, what is the, just from your gut feeling, what is probably the biggest reason why students just want to drop or don't want to come?
Oh, from my experience, they feel they get far behind, say they have a truancy problem, and they just don't want to come to school, or there's all kinds of issues that can keep them home, and then when they get to school, they feel so far behind that they feel they can't catch up. And this is where all the intervention, the small teams, the Apex and everything, where we're trying to push these kids and give them a little bit more oomph to get them through. And I think that's the biggest problem. They feel like they're so far behind they can't get caught up. And you know, there's of course all other kinds of underlying things why they're not coming, but they feel they can't catch up.
All right, any other questions? Thank you very much, and welcome on to the team. We look forward to working with you.
Laura, you got any feedback for the board 2 weeks into your job?
I've been in the Apex room twice every day for the last almost 2 weeks. So, and we do have 2 that I think are going to be there. One had lunch with me today, and assures me he's going to be done in the next 2 weeks. So,
Good.
you know, I know all those kids, so that's kind of that's an advantage.
We have high expectations for you, Laura.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
If I can
All right,
learn.
the next one is engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
All right.
appreciate it.
The table was specifically set up tonight so that there was one microphone for Kristen and whoever she wanted to pass it to, because Mr. Passarella will be speaking with Mr.
Yes.
Ostro next.
Yes.
And we wanted to make sure Mr. Passarella didn't get access to the microphone.
She's pulling rank. I'll report that right now. I appreciate that. I will step back from my colleague.
I'm going to start by just explaining a little bit about the engagement chart. So as you can see, there's a decline in the engagement rate from last year to this year. But that number is only as accurate as the information that's in Skywood, which is our grading system that we use. And so in other words, one of the reasons that this number could have decreased could be is that the activity rosters may not have been as accurate as the students that were showing up. So if a student came, you know, halfway through the year, maybe that student didn't get added to that activity roster, and so they're not in Skyward. But that's only one reason why this number could have dropped from one year to the next. So one thing that we did during the residency process in the summer is that we asked all students that came through that process to take a survey to identify how many students weren't participating, and to try to identify some of the reasons why they weren't participating. So you can see we had 1,119 students that were surveyed. So that's not our entire student body, but those are the students that we were able to capture. Of those students, 300 reported not participating in a sport or extracurricular activity. Of those, almost half said that they just weren't interested in the opportunities that we had. And so John is going to talk about some of the things that we currently do and then some of the additional plans we have to encourage students to participate in the activities.
Respectfully, I'm going to defer to that response after I make a statement to the board. And I mean this, I've been in this position for 11 years, and a lot has gone on, interventions and opportunities we put in place for students. A board will sit there and make decisions. I heard Mr. Walsh talking about what does this title do, and Dr. Keene asking about numbers, and how it reflects, PTAB and all that, and Mr. Gritchen asking about specifics, and the rest of you the same. You see, what you don't understand sometimes, because you're not in the trenches, is the impact you really are having as a board. I sit back and it's very exciting to see what's happening under the leadership right now. And the leadership does begin with 7, and obviously our superintendent. And there's nothing in line for me. Obviously, I'm not in line for a contract. But I did talk to him about that earlier. I heard about that $9 million, and I'm thinking. But it's critical you understand something, is what Neil Dugetti brought to the table. I really mean it. It's important you understand it. When we sit with Kristen and we're talking and about art and about engagement with students and hearing Mr. Gritchen say, what about these students? Where are they at? Why aren't they here? Is it about attendance? And seeing what takes place in the trenches with Mr. Sibley, Mr. Dugetti. As we heard of this opportunity that we're trying to get in the body of the new assistant principal to see where can we maximize that individual? Where would it affect? Yes, graduation rate. We know that, but it's bigger than that. It's a human being's life. And it's their future. And to have an opportunity to do that with the individuals we're putting in place is very exciting. And because it's gonna matter. And sometimes those things take time. To gather data, I was talking to Kristen today, and I was saying, once we get this data, it almost demands and mandates you to pursue another level of data collection, to even break that down further. And we talked about that before we came here, about the summer school data, what to look for even more so. And in the form of the survey that took place, with Kevin requesting that at the residency with students, and why are they not involved, and what can you do to get them involved? And you just said it, they're not going to come to school, they're not going to come, but we don't give up. What I've seen Dave Sibley and his team do, and his team is the student services team and the counselors, the case managers, I mean everybody involved, going to houses, bringing the police, it's critical. So what I'm basically saying is it's starting to really not be separate, it's coming together. It's a real exciting opportunity that we're seeing for students who struggle and those who excel and don't need the nudge but need the opportunity. So we're doing the right things, and sometimes, like you said, the numbers are numbers, but the numbers indicate some but not everything. So we're looking at things now, and I will now go back to what you asked me to do and speak to this. What we're doing is the system was new in place for the pay to participate last year for activities. It's a whole new, not accountability, but a way to acknowledge what's being done within your clubs as far as a sponsor. So it was new for them. So maybe some didn't understand truly the not roster, but what determines student being there. In some cases this year we had staff saying, but the first 2 meetings they're deciding. And then I turned to Artie and I said, okay, help me out. You have team, sports, how does that apply? See if that template can be used for when you decide a student's on your roster and that name gets submitted, and then if in fact it applies for participation or competition, they're billed. And it's not about the money, but it's about making accurate rosters for engagement. That's what it's about, we know that. And so that's critical for us. And right now we're getting ready, as noted on the bottom of the document, literally to have an activity fair. And that exposes those clubs to the students who might not normally have an opportunity, one, to see them, and then to discuss with students involved in that. Besides that, and Pam has discussed this, of what to do on the website. I'm meeting with sponsors again next week, we've already met, to discuss a few things, and one of them is how they can literally publicize, in a sense, their clubs on the website. And what their students can do to promote those clubs within the venue. We have a captive audience, 3 periods a day, in a sense, and that's lunch. You know, those students are captive, they're out there, you bring them to them, they go to them. That's where we went into literally not just having students there, but having them, in a sense, like for the fine arts and the culinary arts, to actually have the students performing, in a sense, the students creating, whether it's foods or in the sense of 3D art or 2D art. That's critical. And then the reality of it is the one-on-one is also important. Opportunities after school, and in that sense, the student services department, which I'm not gonna lie to you, to pull this off is gonna be an unbelievable obstacle, and they know they're up for it, but to meet with those students, one-on-one, to connect with them when they're sitting there. And we sat and discussed how can we change, if need be, even the questionnaire at the beginning of the year. And we discussed what that looks like. So as the activities director, it's critical that that responsibility come back to me. That's my job. And working one-on-one with those sponsors, it's been really very exciting to see it. The shift has occurred in the last two to 3 years by the elimination of clubs. Some clubs have literally been saturated with the number of students. One is SA. You acknowledge that by bringing back a co-sponsor. The volume is great. As Mr. Cindy had stated, Tard, when do you decide for another sponsor for supervision with athletics? Well, it's similar with the clubs also, obviously. And so we're looking at all that also. Participation, we know, is critical. Those conversations in the office regarding those students who are having attendance issues or behavioral issues, we're asking them, what are you involved with? And why not? And for some kids, they're just disengaged. You know, they have so much going on. Some of the students not here are over there. They're involved in athletics, they may have 7 classes. They may just be so full. And who knows what type of responsibilities they may have at home. We have to find that out, to see if we can change how we present and what we offer to our students, to make sure we're not creating barriers. I think I've covered everything. Sorry.
No, we've talked a lot about athletics, obviously, over the last year with the pay to participate and us being able to monitor it. We saw last year a shift that we actually had more athletes come out than we've ever had. However, they look different. We didn't have 2 or 3 sport athletes as much, so the overall participation for the whole year went down. So we made the adjustment with pay to participate, so we have to monitor and see if that has an impact. Right now, our numbers seem very high in the fall compared to last year, but we have to wait till the end of the fall to see if we have some people drop out or quit the teams. One question did ask, Mr. Walsh asked, my number that I reported for athletics was different than what Chrissy had on hers. My number I reported is what we reported at the beginning of the year to the IHSA, and I just kept that through the year. We can certainly change that moving forward. I did talk to Pam today. The one thing that we have in athletics, which if the board wants us to actually put a separate column for that, is we'll have a number of athletes. I want to say right now there's probably 20 students that come in at the beginning of the year that are ineligible for sports due to grades. And they will be ineligible for the entire semester unless something changes, but they could carry over. So if we want to count that against us, I guess, in a sense, for athletics, we can. The other thing is there could be a transfer student that comes in that is ineligible due to a variety of reasons. If we want to do the full population, we can, or if you want me to do a side note, okay, these 25, 30 athletes or students actually cannot participate in sports due to being ineligible for whatever reason, we can kind of put that on to get a more accurate account on it. But the number I used was at the beginning.
Why don't you start tracking that, because then as you track that number, you can share that with the guidance department, because that relates to graduation and matriculation. It all feeds into one pipeline. So,
but some of them that will not be ineligible on my end will be eligible to participate in an activity. So so your number might be different than mine if we want to do it that way.
You know, I leave it to, he knows that Kevin's, I just didn't, we see a lot of different reports with a lot of numbers. It didn't seem like, I found your report search and board book fastest, so I used it as a reference.
But I used the beginning number that we report to the IHSA.
Kristen, what's one of the biggest problems we have with activities in regards to tracking? Because I think that's just like with our matriculation, it's the accuracy of how we're tracking. Do you have some feedback on it, or does John? I'm thinking of something, but I want to make sure I'm trying to volley the ball back to you guys.
Well, I have an opinion on that, is I need to convey to my sponsors what constitutes a member. And we need to look at, and we're really, with the chart we have this year, is specifying when is your first official event or competition. And that's being driven by the needs of the business office, so that payments could be in place for those competitive and performance-based activities. Now, that's one group, because obviously there's service groups, and then there's those that in fact, obviously they're not a pay to participate, but we're looking at numbers, just the hard numbers. So me conveying that, in my opinion, to the sponsors, how critical that data is. And could sponsors not be as educated in a sense of what that means to be a member? That's my responsibility as the activities director, to communicate specifically with them and not random check them, but just have them sit and discuss with me in what they believe is, in their opinion, constitutes a member on their side.
Do you evaluate?
Do you, before you go off of that, do you believe there are more students attending our clubs than are being reported in those pay to participate
I
rosters?
have no information that would lead me to believe that. I
Okay.
have nothing. I couldn't be in a court of law and say, here's a document, this is why. I mean, they'll be the same as any of you saying, do you believe
Okay.
that the same? So could it be the case? It could be, but I don't see why they would. I mean, unless if they believe it's gonna impact their group. I'll give you an example. Let's just say randomly we grab chess. It's a small group of kids.
Right.
It's easy, if this child ends up going to state, I mean, so I guess it could occur, but here's what we're looking at, we discussed this week with Pam briefly, is potentially what could be occurring is, and this could occur, and I'll be real brief, is you might have students not signing up because they know they're not gonna make it to the competition of IHSA, but they wanna be in that club. But it's difficult for a parent maybe to come up with that $100 or the $150. And so you may have the club suffering because of that, in a sense of enrollment and development.
Well,
And that's where maybe a sponsor could be doing it, but I have no information that will lead me to believe
that's
that.
my question, because if you look at, like, for example, chess, the number of students that paid to be on the team, but when I'm here after 4 o'clock and you go to his room, there might be 40 kids playing chess in there.
I've never.
So that's why, I mean, some of the kids would rather just hang with the chess club, but not pay to be on the chess team. So that's
Yeah, I've
one of
never
the
experienced
things
any of that.
we're having, you know, and when we talk to some of the sponsors, and when I've had some conversations with the union, similar to like Shenanigans, which is like our improv club, there's about 15 or 20 that he uses for the performance, but he lets any freshman or sophomore come and just do skits on the side and practice because he wants to build the program. But those kids don't pay the $75 because they're not actually doing the performance. So I don't know if that's skewing our numbers or if that's something we need to look at, because it's a place for that student to hang out, be involved with his buddies or her buddies, but they're maybe not on the
It
participation
seems to me
numbers.
it's, you know, you have to educate us. The board's gone back and forth on this. And, you know, everybody's got to follow the policy, whether they like it or whether they don't like it. So, you know, if the answer is, in order to join the chess club, you have to pay, and again, we all have difference of opinions on that, we should do that and have, you know, come back again and say, well, let's only, you know, make the people that compete pay if other people want to find our Shenanigans or whatever it is, because not only is the policy, we're trying to gauge the engagement because we're told that's what we should gauge, and if we're getting bad data, it's hard to gauge. And the survey was actually very useful, and I know surveys are a lot of work and you do them, but you know, if you look at the numbers, assuming you could extrapolate it across, 5% said it's too expensive. Well, I hope everybody in this, all the students and the families know, you know, we have a policy to deal with if there's an issue with cost, they can appeal to the principal and the superintendent. Now, I don't know if it's a kid who his parents say, if you want to join, you have to pay yourself, and he's not going to fork up his own money, or family who's like got the money and said, forget it, I'm not going to pay that. We just can't tell from that. But the second thing is, you know, not interested, and we struggled with the clubs, is that they're not interested in, and Gary's asked this several times, is that not interested because the clubs we offer aren't their cup of tea? You know, if we offered language clubs again, for instance, you know, would we get a lot big bang for a buck in having a better engagement? So, you know, it's important that people understand, you know, we struggled with the idea of making people pay, but we felt it was necessary. But we also are listening to the administration, the staff saying engagement's hugely important. So two things. One is we have a policy, follow the policy. We have to know what the engagement rate is. And the second one is come back to us and say, you know what, if you offer, and again, I'm just, interestingly, in our report on the clubs, we had an income in the German club, and I didn't think we had a German club anymore, maybe.
It's not active.
Off the book. So, you know, maybe if we said, if we just offered the language, and I don't care, you know, ski club, whatever,
Sure.
it could be
I agree.
anything, and say, there's a pretty big bang for the buck here, that's, but, and again, we don't know enough about it, but otherwise, we sit here struggling, you know, just looking at the data
The data doesn't tell you everything.
doesn't tell you everything.
And taking that further, the 142 says they're not interested. Are you gonna go delve into those responses and find out what they,
There's a couple.
what piques their interest?
Yeah, there's a, when I referred to it earlier, when I said the survey is great, but, and
Right.
that's the but.
Right.
But why not? And speaking to the attendance of the clubs, I've had conversations with Mr. Ostro, and I'm of the mindset as he is, and as the board is the club is the club. The policy is the policy. If you're in it, you're in it. Everyone on, and we use the example just yesterday morning, the football team. You don't play, but you're on that club. You're on that team. You've paid to be on that team, and you know you're not gonna be in pretty much every game. You might get a couple minutes, but you're still on that team, and you paid. And so my feeling is, and I'm meeting with sponsors individually in my office, and those meetings start next week, where in fact I go over my expectations. And what I learned as their activities director from last year regarding report, first off, accurate rosters, and then their responsibility, which was new to them, as far as interacting with their members to say, you can't. And if they're uncomfortable with the, you can't participate, you can't compete, that'll be my job to have those conversations, those tough conversations with parents.
But it goes beyond that. When you evaluate a sponsor, do you look at to make sure that he is marketing his activity, is working with kids to bring in like a feeder, to make sure that he's going outside so his kids are coming in there joining that? Are you evaluating him on that? Are you evaluating on, are they up to date? Are they making it a fun activity or an activity that kids feel important? Is that part of the evaluation process, whether they should be hired for the next year?
Well, to answer that question, there's no official evaluation process for sponsors. It is in fact based on the feedback I'm receiving from either students or my opinion as far as how I've dealt with them throughout the year, as far as their follow-up on following protocol, procedures, in this case, board policy. So yes, but in the sense of, you know, developing the program, by us as a school district having eliminated the clubs, the enrollment isn't the problem. That's not our issue. Chess club is chess club. I have not experienced, and we use chess club just as an example, I have not experienced any observation on my part of excessive numbers where they weren't reported. You know, you can look into it and we can all make that assumption potentially with any club, I guess, but I don't have any data that says that. My interaction with the staff and it's through their reporting system, a document that they provide with me at the beginning of the year, the goals they set, if they accomplish those goals, and then the end of the year document where in fact it reflects back on the year and if they've met those goals. And so my evaluation isn't whether or not the program is excelling as far as with membership, because that's never been an issue. Membership has always been there. And depending on the club, the IHSA sponsored clubs such as, in this case, the Scholastic Bowl, or the Math Club, and then happens to be Chess Club, those clubs have always been solid in their competition and in their numbers. But they're limited because, for example, Chess Club, and it is problematic in a sense for that club and numerous clubs where in fact students know they're not gonna make it there, especially unless you're on the top of your game literally, and not, no pun intended, with chess, but you're there to learn, you know, and you're there to develop. And so that's where my job as the activities director, one-on-one with the sponsors, is to remind them of the board policy that has to be followed.
Yeah, but it goes beyond the board policy. I think that you need to look at how you're evaluating that sponsor. And it's gonna have to change around to make sure that you got the right person in place that's doing it and gonna grow it.
Yeah, but sponsors are volunteers, correct?
Some-
And
No.
Some
they're
are,
paid
They're all
positions.
paid.
Some are.
But they're
It's a
paid
hand.
stipends,
There's
but,
5 volunteers.
Yeah.
well, what I mean by volunteer, they don't have to be a sponsor for an after-school program to keep their teaching job.
No.
No.
So if it becomes, you know, egregious or hard to be a sponsor and somebody's evaluating you, then we'll just have staff say, I don't really need that extra burden.
Sure. I think what the activity thing is it's different from a sport where there's some sports where there's an off-season and stuff.
Right.
An activity is more or less a place for a student to go and intermingle and with their classmates and something they're interested in. So I can tell you, it's a thing to where, you know, somebody might be sitting with three of their buddies. Hey, we're going to we don't have it anymore, but to the autos club. He goes with that person. Next thing you know, he starts working on a car. Before you know it, he signs up for auto mechanic. It's different of, hey, I paid $200. I know I got to earn my spot on the football team, but if not, I still get a jersey, I still get a helmet, I still get to be on the sideline for the games. So it's just something that as a board, I think we need to review. And the challenge to my challenge to the administration this year was to make sure we're tracking it every way possibly that we can track it, so that we can come back to the board and say, hey, listen, we need to look at how we're charging pay to participate for clubs. Does that need to be tweaked where it's lower, but it's for all clubs? Or is there something that we tie to a registration fee? Or it's just something we need to look at.
Was part of the survey a question, what would you like to see that we don't have?
No, I don't believe it was.
I thought there was a general question though that said, is the clubs offered we are not interested in, right?
That was not, but that's one thing that the guidance counselors are gonna do. They're gonna have focus groups of the students that said they were not interested, and to identify some of the things that they would be interested in participating.
And I think that's a key one. I think when I saw your recommendation on guidance counselor, those are the ones that are gonna have the one-on-one with the student and really can get the feeling and the
Good relationships, good conversations.
You know what I mean? So
Kevin, clearly, if you look at, you looked at them and they explain them, I mean, they have put some serious thought and have some good ideas in my mind. I mean, I'm not a high school kid, but it seems like they've got some ideas of how to reach out to the kids and try to get them more interested, so that's a step in the right direction, I think.
We're really thinking out of the box and trying to really just continue to do it, because we know one thing impacts the other. It's just,
I
you
would
can't
also-
just be here for one piece of your education.
I would also look at our conference schools and see what they're doing as extra. Utilize their resources.
I just received a document from our conference, I don't know if Art has it, and I don't think I shared it with Kristen yet, from Glenbard South, where in fact it captured, and I believe it had both activities and sports. So we're looking at that as a conference, because as the conference expands, we want to look at what we can compete with. So that's a document that we are looking at.
Did I give you the number of kids in those?
No, they didn't, but
That's
what-
probably something you
that's
should
a
call
great
it to
point.
see.
Yeah.
To see that and see how they track it, if at all, and what they do to promote it. That's a great point.
All right, any other questions for this group?
I do. Do you have a mechanism in the clubs, I don't even know if it's possible, where a club can fundraise to raise the funds for all the kids? Because I can see families that don't fall below the line to get free and reduced lunch. I can see kids coming from families that are just in the middle, and mom and dad or whatever said, we just don't want that expense on the bill. It's not in our budget. And so is there a way, creative ways where the our young adults can kind of earn that money, or the club can fundraise and say, we've got a pool and
Yes.
we can get in?
Right now, a sponsor is exploring that, and that happens to be one of our clubs that competes at the state level, just because of that,
Right.
to reach out. There's different sort of opportunities that are out there. Some are on the internet, where in fact you make donations and you put it out there, but then the internet source, so that you can speak to this better possibly if you had a conversation with you, controls what you do with it, and they collect a percentage of it, or, you know, so. But here's what could happen. If a teacher, let's just say each of you represents a club, and you solicit through your staff, your colleagues, to say, anyone might want to make a donation to the club. We have a handful of students, I know 3 for sure, who couldn't compete, who've been with the group and are short funds. The activity fund that I have cannot be used for fees. It can be used for supplies or anything within the club. But the activity club the activity account that I have is not for those type of fees. It can't be for student fees, because then it defeats the purpose in a sense, and not that there was a purpose, but then what's the point of having a board policy where you pay? And so sponsors are beginning, and for sure one right now, and I think two, or is it just one still? It is Chess right now, yeah. Who's looking into that opportunity that's out there for sponsors who are struggling with just that challenge. So it's once again, we're exploring that to see what that looks like. But we have to be real careful on how to manage that.
So the board's aware, I think we spent approximately about $175,000 roughly on stipends for activities. And I think we collected about $15,000 in pay to participate. So just under 10%. So the question is, and what I really want to focus on for the next year or two with the board is that 10%, or maybe the 10% we might be discouraging from getting involved. I don't know. I'm looking at Mr. Gritchen because I know he gets nervous about that.
No, it's
But
not, the point is, let's know the answer to that
Right.
question before you make any changes.
And that's what I'm having them dig
Right.
on
You better believe
this year.
We're really
Alright.
trying to peel the onion on that one.
Any other questions? Because, thank you very much. We appreciate Kristen. Great job tonight facilitating all groups. I'm very
Great
impressed.
job. Can we look,
Thank you.
let's get
Thank you very much.